Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back. My pun is falling out. It's falling down. I can leave it down. I can be like the new style. Let's see. I'll leave it down. This piece just like, it just fell down from my bun just for the video. Just like, you know what? I don't want to be up there with those guys. I want to be down here. Alright. So this video is actually impromptu. I decided to do this video after having this discussion, very interesting interaction with a female colleague where I work at the Psychiatric hospital here in New York City. And I had told her, hold on, let me get this going. I said to her, I just finished eating dinner, you guys. So, I'm unwinding. But I said to her that I think based on her approach that she will probably be a better fit working in the prison system. And she was like taken aback a little bit, but she's like, nah, she doesn't want to work there because, and I think she never worked there actually. She never worked in a jail or prison. And she said because she believes like there's a lot of trauma in the prison and she doesn't want to suffer like vicarious trauma by witnessing what she's seeing, right? And I had to say to her, based on my experience, now you guys know, before I moved back to New York City, it's just something like weird looking with my bun. Makes me want to, I think what it is this piece that's hanging. I'm going to fix it. So before I moved back to New York City, I actually was working in the prison in California. And she asked me, she was like, were you working in the jail or prison? I'm like, no, this was prison. Jail is a different story. In fact, I actually think working in the jail is probably less, or more challenging, shall I say, more challenging than working in a prison, because jail is more transitional, right? And those guys, women too, but people that are in jail are not really stabilized, right? They're not kind of settled in to the regular routine of things, whereas in prison, you know, that's long-term stay. People are there, they have got acclimated to the program, and they're kind of more institutionalized in a sense, right? So I would have to say, though I never worked in a jailhouse, I have to say that, yeah, I think working in a prison is probably less challenging. So before I moved back to New York City on April 1st in 2020, I actually completed my last clinical rotation at a prison in California. I was working for the California Department of Corrections. And that conversation I had with her today kind of made me think about just the differences between these two systems. Granted, now I currently work as a full-time psychologist for New York State. Interesting, going from one state agency in California to another state agency here in New York. But I work for the state, and it's at a psychiatric facility here in New York City. And there are stark differences between the two that I'm going to highlight here in this video that I noticed just based on my own experience as a psychologist working in both systems. So going back to her assumption that it's more trauma, in a sense, is more like challenging working in a prison system as compared to working in a psychiatric facility. And I'm like, honestly, I think this, working in this environment, though I feel like I can rise to the plate in any environment, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And this is not my first time working in a psychiatric facility. In fact, my very first introduction in working in a psychiatric facility was I was very young. I was a junior. I think I was a junior in college, junior or senior in college at Florida State, and I had took a job at Appalachian Center in Tallahassee. I don't even know if it's still there, but I used to work at Appalachian Center as a mental health technician. So this is not my first time working in psych hospital, though this where I work now is more for long-term stay. So it's for people who were deemed to be a danger to themselves or others in society and needed more long-term stabilization. And for various reasons, some related to a criminal offense that they committed, likely murder, and versus where I worked in Florida at the Appalachian Center, that was more short-term stabilization. So that was like, I think the average length of stay was like 3 days. It was like a 72-hour hold, which they call Baker Act in Florida. But I have to say, yeah, working in a psychiatric facility is definitely more intense as compared to working at a state prison facility, because the population is much different. So before I get into talking about my work as a clinical psychologist at these two opposing settings, I'm going to kind of paint a picture of what these facilities kind of look like structurally, and how they're kind of laid out, right? There are big differences. So at the prison back in California, first of all, the location was like far out, far out nowhere. Like you had to have a car. Let's just point that out, right? You had to have a car to get there. No buses. And it's funny because I remember I actually looked on Google to see like if I could take public transportation there, and public transportation didn't even go there, yo. It's a long road that takes you all the way down to that prison. So I definitely had to get a car, which I did. I had to invest in a car when I was working there. And that was a nice, decent drive, because again, it's away from the city, away from LA, right? A good, I think, hour and 45-minute drive, and not to mention traffic. Ugh. LA traffic makes it like 2 hours plus, but so you get to the facility, and you guys go back and look at my video where I actually recorded a video sitting in my car in the parking lot, not of course in the actual prison facility, because they did not allow any cell phones. It's actually a felony to bring in a cell phone. Like, that was strict on that. But I was in my car and I made a video. I did a review on the Hidden Colors 5 series, which actually went viral, so you guys can check that out if you want. But I actually was in the parking lot sitting in my car of the prison. But the prison facility, it is secure. It's just like your typical what you see like on TV or whatever. If you ever watch TV, you notice like the setup of a prison, how like there's barbed wires, like it's locked down, it's secure. Like not anybody from the outside can just come up in there, right? You're not going to be able to get in. You have to have clearance to get inside. And what else can I remember? Oh, so we actually, every staff member, every employee that worked there, we had to go through security. And going through security, we had to, the funny thing is, yo, it was crazy how it had it. I remember now. So we had to exchange our ID for the state ID. We could not take the state ID like off grounds, right? So we had to give them like a copy of our driver's license, and they would give us our state ID. And then the same process will happen when we leave. We have to exchange, our state ID and get our driver's license so we can go home. So you go through the entrance, through through at the beginning of at the entrance of the facility. You have to go through that exchange, and then you go in, and then you have to stop and go through another security where we actually pick up our device. It's like a security device that actually beeped. It was like for our protection. So let's say something went down on the grounds, the device would beep, right? So depending on our position, if we lay back too far, or of course, if we're like laying prostrate on the floor, or if we're being attacked, it would beep. It also would beep when we pass through different areas, because they had like these sensors that were located like all throughout the grounds of the prison, and so it could track everywhere we went, like all of our movements, right? So we go through, let's say, the psych office, and we exit from there, and we go into the ward. Walking down the ward, it would beep. It would pick up our movements at so many different feet as we're walking. And so I just got kind of used to the beat, but that's another difference I noticed. So we had that. There were obviously correctional officers at the prison, and I don't think they had guns, but they did have like weapons. And there were a few times that they actually, I won't say it was a riot, but it was like commotion happening. On one of the wards I was working on, I think it was a fight. Usually that's kind of the most what usually happens. And it's funny because my colleague was asking me, like, how was it? And it's just like, it's not that much happening, to be honest. It's more happening where I work currently at a psychiatric hospital than what was happening at the prison. The prison, by comparison, was pretty like lax. There were fights though, but it wasn't like everyday fighting. But it was things happening, but not to the scale of where I work now. And I'm going to kind of transition and tell you guys about my experience where I work now at the psychiatric hospital. But so at the facility where I work, continuing and talking about like the setup, the structural setup of how it was, there were different, what do they call it, pods, I guess, different like housing units, where the inmates, live, where they were housed at. And predominantly the facility was male, but it did have a female unit, which I actually worked on both. But it was a big ass fucking, it was a big layout. It was a big facility. And I remember this because I had to walk to different wards in the facility. And I worked like, there were different levels. So there were like the low risk up to like very high risk inmates. And of course they put me on a high risk unit. This is just how we got our experience in it. And I laugh because where I work now, like the transition to kind of get me acclimated to the facility where I work was kind of slow. And it's like they didn't want to like put too much on me, and it's just like, oh, very protective, right? I guess rightfully so. But I'm like, y'all have no idea. Like my prior experience, like they throw you out there. That's how you that's how you learn. They throw you out there and they give you the most difficult patients to work with, or the most difficult inmates, so to speak, right? But where I work, like, yeah, they're very protective, and they were cautious, like, oh, okay, we're not going to assign this person because this person is like one of the most challenging patients, and, he's a CPL patient, basically criminal process law. He's there by court order. But all of them are there by court order, essentially. But he committed a crime, basically, and pled not guilty by reason of mental defect, also known as the insanity plea. So we have a few, well, actually, I won't say a few. We have like a good number of patients there at the facility where I work that fall under that category. But they were like, no, we're going to be careful. We're not going to, whereas like all my prior experiences is just like, all right, this is what you're training for, right? This is what you went to school for, so here you go, right? And so I was placed definitely on a high risk unit. I was placed on like varying units too, like not just high risk, but like low, medium, high, girls, boys, like all of them pretty much. And I remember having to walk to the different units there at the prison facility, and like I said, it was big, and we're talking about California, and it's like desert, like hot, like it's hot, okay? And so I just remember, like, yeah, the heat, this sweltering heat, and just walking from this one to that one, and yeah, it was a decent walk, shall I say, getting from one side of the grounds all the way to the other side, all the way here, and mind you, my role is a psychologist, and so part of that is testing and doing psychological testing, and with that, there's like a whole briefcase, like there's like a freaking suitcase type of bag that we're carrying with the test, right, to transport our materials so that I can do this testing on these guys. So I'm carrying the load on my shoulder, walking to different units at the facility, right, just giving you guys like a visual. But so where I work now is a big building. It's a very big building, many floors. The grounds aren't necessarily secure, though there is security that works, but in terms of like structurally secure, not necessarily. You can like go and come. It's not like barbed wire like your typical prison look where I work now. And I'm not walking around with like a personal security system attached to my waist, right, hooked on my belt or my pants loop. Is more just like, you know, you gotta like be alert kind of thing, right? And of course there's like a number we can call, right? We have an internal system set up for safety if things go wrong, but it's definitely not the level of prison security where I work now. And another difference is like with the prison, the inmates' rooms, I'm about to say client, but because I'm trying to go back and forth between prison and psychiatric facility terminology. But within the prison, like, it's a prison. And even though this was a juvenile correctional facility, state correctional facility, it's still set up just like a prison, right? The structure is the same. Like, they are on lockdown. They're in their rooms majority of the day. And we called it rooms as opposed to cell because, you know, granted, the age range was from 15 to 25. So they didn't like the term cell, right? We didn't like to use that word cell with, you know, this younger population. But it's the same design. It's a cell, yo. Like, they have this very tiny window to look out of. The size of the cell is just like the typical size of a cell. Hard as bed. And they are on lockdown. And of course, they get to come out, you know, to use the restroom. They get to come out to participate in, like, TV time, which is, I think, only 1 hour out of the day. It's, like, very structured and limited time that they can be out of their rooms. But the majority of the time, like, they are in their rooms locked in. They cannot exit, coming out, you know, go out and come in as freely as they would like to. They have to be let out with the key. Versus where I work now, it's not like that. And where I work now, they actually have a roommate. So the prison, they didn't have a roommate. They had a room to themselves, I think. Seems like it's been so long ago. And in fact, it's been a couple years, right? We're talking about, that was back in 2020. I was working at the prison from 2019 to 2020, and we're in 2022. So yeah, a lot has happened since then, clearly, especially with the pandemic. But what I recall, did they fucking have a roommate? I think, did they or didn't they? I can't even freaking remember. Yo, it's crazy. I can't even remember if they had roommates or not. And like I said, the setup was different. So when I would go and do therapy in the prison on these units, it's not like I went and got like the inmate, like not like knocked on. It's not set up like that where you go knock on their door or peek in the window and go get them. No. Who runs the facility is the correctional officer. So anything that you need to be doing with the inmates there, you have to go through the correctional officers because they run the facility, right? All permissions go through them, right? So, I would, contact the COs, and then they would go and get the inmate and then bring them to the room where we can do therapy, and everything is open. There's no privacy at all. Of course, in the prison or in a psychiatric center where I work, similar, but it's different. Both are locked down. So in the psychiatric facility, even though, yes, I said that it is structurally kind of less secure in terms of the entrance of it on the grounds, right, when being able to actually enter the facility. Like, you can drive up and park. Now, you can't just go in and come out the building like that. No, that part is definitely secure. But in terms of entering the grounds, you can just drive on in. And it's much different at the prison facility. But yeah, so the rooms are different. The rooms at the psychiatric center where I work, the psychiatric hospital, they are definitely much bigger. The windows are big, like the patients can look out the window. It's a big ass window, a lot of sunlight coming in, much different than prison cell, right? Where you have like this size window and they're just like barely able to look through the freaking window outside to, get a glimmer of sunlight. The doors to the rooms at the psychiatric hospital where I work, for the patients, they're open. They can come out, go in. They're not obligated or required to stay in their room. It's much different. Now, we actually encourage them to be out their room. So that's a funny thing. It's like complete opposite, right? Night and day. So in the prison, they have to be like, that's their place, is in their room. Or the cell, I guess you could say, right? That's where they're supposed to be, unless they are out for programming, which is only like an hour a day, where they get like TV time, or if they're doing therapy with a psychologist, or if they're going for an appointment, with medical. But nah, they in their room, or their cell, shall I say, in prison. Whereas in the psych hospital, they're supposed to be out and participating in programming in groups, or watching TV and interacting, socializing, right? That's a part of their treatment plan. So that's one major difference. What else? There's a lot of differences, of course. But I'm going to go into like my role as a psychologist working at these two different facilities. So my role as a psychologist, I would say, is not that much different, though it looks different, right? So essentially the work responsibilities of psychologists, we do testing, psychological testing, and we do therapy, we do report writing. I still do the same thing, right? The difference is, so at the prison, I actually did the intakes. Because there was an intake unit. So I worked on the intake. I worked on pretty much all the unit, or a good number of the units, shall I say, at the prison. Especially the intake unit, and it's funny because the intake unit actually didn't open until like midway when I was working there in that year. Because the facility where I worked wasn't an intake facility. So there are certain correctional facilities in California that are responsible for doing intakes, and others are responsible for housing inmates. But so the one I worked, when I first started, it wasn't an intake facility, but then it became one. And so then I started doing intakes, and the intake is pretty much a full psychological evaluation, including testing, collecting background information, clinical interviewing, collecting collateral information, and integrating all of this, behavior observations, all of that, integrating all of that into a psychological report. So I did that. I actually like doing that. I like just interacting with people in general, but I actually like doing those intakes or the psychological evaluations, just to, first of all, be one of the first people that the inmate actually encountered. And I like that they set it up that way, where the psychologist is actually one of the first people, literally, that they encounter alongside medical. So part of the intake process, how it went, they came, I think, on a bus. I don't even know what type of vehicle they came on because I didn't see that part. But they are escorted. Of course, they're in handcuffs. All of this, like any movement that's happening, these guys are in cuffs, okay? Let's be clear about that. But they go to medical, and I was part of that process. Psychology is definitely right there, meeting with them when they're going, getting the medical assessment, evaluation, and all of that with the medical doctors and the nurse. My role was to do a mental status exam, just making sure that they're oriented to person, time, place, so they're not having any hallucinations or delusions. I'm documenting all of this, and I'm observing and interacting with them. I'm assessing all of this. And then once they clear with medical, they would be assigned to a ward. Once they get on the ward, boom, I'm right in there doing a psychological evaluation. I sometimes would be able to do it like in one session, but it depends. Sometimes I will have to break it up to 2 to 3. So it just depends on that person's level of attention and concentration, their comfort level, their frustration level, all of that, how much they're able to tolerate with the testing and with the asking questions of during the interview process. But I like that. I like that. Like I said, I was one of the first people that they made contact with, because I think, like, I felt like my spirit, and just the nature of who I am is very calming and reassuring, especially as a black woman, considering over 99%, and I'm not exaggerating, of the guys there, and girls, it was girls, but actually it was, I would say, realistically, it was about 85% male, and I would say 15% female. But of the total population, 99% were black and brown. Very small percentage. We had a few white sprinkled in there. But yeah, overwhelmingly it was black and brown, or shall I say African American and Latino population. And so I think it was very important for them to be able to see a face of a black woman who was very caring, nurturing, understanding, empathic, non-judgmental, and compassionate. I think that was very important. And so I definitely demonstrated that with that interaction that I had with them. I also did therapy, which was pretty interesting, because that's when you really get to dive a little deeper, right? It's one thing to do a psychological evaluation and clinical interview and kind of scratch the surface and get to know a person. But then when you're meeting with a person ongoing on a regular basis, you really get to peel back some of those layers. And yeah, it was interesting. Now this, like I said, it took place in California. In the Los Angeles metropolitan area, and anybody familiar with LA, we know that is the gang capital of America. Now, of course, all the dudes in the hood, right? The niggas in the hood be like, nah, it's gangs everywhere. You know, everybody claim their hood is the hardest, right, across the U.S. Of course, yes, there are gangs everywhere. However, the gangs, the real gangs are in LA. Like, it's real time gang banging out there, and it still exists. People center their whole lives, like their whole identity, their makeup, who they are is that, right? Just being a gang banger. And so, of course, the prisons are filled with gang members, and these, like, you can see it. Like, it's a different culture. It's a different reality. It's just different, but it's very highly saturated out there in LA. with gangs. Of course, there are gangs here in New York City too, but it's just like you don't really see it. Right? They're there, but you don't really see it as much. And so that's pretty much what I was working with, and talking about people who have committed armed robbery, people who have taken people's lives, killed people in the commission of gang activity. I did therapy. I had my caseload was about 6-7 deep. Not that many clients, because I wasn't working full time. I was only working part time, or half time, shall I say, 20 hours a week. This is a clinical rotation, so all of this work is unpaid, of course. This is like, you know, part of my training as a clinical psychologist in my final year of my studies. Or shall I say fourth year. The final year actually was spent here in New York City doing my pre-doc internship. But in my final year of my academic studies, as in part of my clinical rotation, was at the prison. And so, yeah, I had a decent caseload. I had a few girls, or shall I say women. I think 2. I think the rest were like men, males, right? One of my clients, you know, she was there for murdering both of her parents. And she was just very tearful. I remember in session, like, there's a lot of catharsis happening. Just tearful, just letting it out, crying. But it's interesting to work with, like, clients, patients who have a lot of trauma that she experienced in her life. There's a lot of trauma just across the board, I think, working with African people. And it doesn't discriminate, right? So it touches like all racial demographics, but you see it obviously a lot in our community. And, you know, it's sad to see, you know, unfortunately, how people deal with their trauma, and how she dealt with it is she dealt with it. She killed both of her parents. So I miss a lot about the prison, especially given that my time there was cut short, like abruptly. We're talking about poor termination process, like with my clients. Anybody who understands therapy and how it works knows that you can't just abruptly terminate, like you can't just stop therapy. You develop a relationship with your clients, your patients. You know, there's a process of termination that you are supposed to go through ethically, right? But thanks to COVID, I couldn't do that. All this just happened so abruptly. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was here in New York City, actually completing the onboarding process for my pre-doc internship. I was doing my paperwork, my criminal background check, fingerprint, and all of that. And I had got a call and an email from my school and my director saying, like, oh, based on what the orders were coming down from the government, they were saying, like, we could not return, and we were deemed to be non-essential employees. Well, we weren't really employees, right? We were employees by the fact that, okay, we were treated as employees working at this facility, but of course we were not like on payroll. And on top of that, we were students. And so, if anything, they felt that the students needed to be protected, and we weren't required to return to work. Now, granted, on one hand, I was like really excited, like, this is a break, early vacation, right? But on the other hand, I was just like, I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye, because this was totally unexpected. When I left LA and I came to New York in March of 2020 to complete the onboarding process for my pre-doc internship that was to start September of 2020, I had no idea this pandemic. Like, I had no idea. I had no idea this was a pandemic, right? That was happening, and that it would forever change the course of everyone's lives, and my life in that moment as a PhD student. and the relationship that I have with my clients working at the prison. You know, because therapy is a relationship, right? And it's very intimate. And I did not get a chance to say goodbye to any of them. I was just like, that hurt. That really hurt. I never got a chance to see them again, ever again, right? We were just told we cannot return back, right? Because there's a national alert. And it was crazy. Everything went on high alert and shelter in place. So, yeah. I did return back to LA, though, after my 10-day stay here in New York when I was going through that process of preparing for my pre-doc internship. I did return, and then I had to make a quick kind of split-second decision, like, what do I do? And I ended up deciding to just pack up all my things and come on back to New York because there was nothing there in LA. I mean, we couldn't return back to our clinical sites at that time. So, yeah. That left a space in my heart, and of course I was thinking about my patients. Like, I hope they're okay. I hope they don't think that I don't want to come back, right? Because I do. I hope that they understand, and I'm sure they do. Like, these are very smart men and women that I work with, and that's another difference. Is like not to say like the people that I work with aren't smart, right? But we're talking about level of cognitive functioning. The level is different, right? And that's another thing that I was saying when I was talking about the level of difficulty or challenge in terms of the difference between working with the population in prison versus where I work now. I would say it was actually, I won't say easier, but yeah, less challenging, like working in the prison. Given that we're talking about higher functioning adults, right? We're not talking about people who suffer from schizophrenia and psychosis and delusions and want to kill themselves or, you know, aren't emotionally, psychologically stable. We're talking about people who are mentally stable. You know, the prison is a different population, right? Like, and I was telling my colleague that if they were not psychiatrically stable, they would not be in that particular placement in the prison. So that, you know, facility is, the general population is for people who are average functioning people. They had average IQs because I did the IQ testing with a good number of them. Average emotional functioning, you know, it's just that they made poor decisions. And they did what they felt was needed to do in the time. You know, a lot of them doing it just out of wanting to belong or fit in. And a lot of them did it, you know, out of just wanting to get money. You know, they come from impoverished backgrounds. And so I'm just do it just because it's fun. It's exciting, you know. You think about the reasons of why people commit crime. Some people just do it because it's an opportunity, right? Crimes of opportunity. They just had an open door to just go and rob someone, right? They got a gun, they got a car, they are bored, right? And they know a person, a place, or a company that is vulnerable. And they go in and they just do the do. So, yeah, that's how that was. So, fast forward to now, working at the psychiatric facility where I work. Again, the population consists of adults. I work with all men, right? Well, take that back. Because now that I'm covering on a different ward that is co-ed, I do have some female patients, right? Just a couple. But on my ward, where I am the ward psychologist, it's all men. And yeah, those guys are not higher functioning, though they can work back up to being better functioning what they are now or what they were when they were admitted to the hospital. But they're not like average functioning, right? And what interferes with their ability to function in society is that they, you know, suffer from severe mental illness, right? Whether it be severe depression, whether it be psychosis, you know, hearing voices, seeing things, having these bizarre delusions, paranoia or grandiose delusions that interferes with their ability to be able to, hold down a job, or maintain healthy, stable relationships. Just being able to have a conversation, at minimum, is difficult for a lot of the people that I work with. So that is part of their treatment plan. Their objectives in their treatment plan speak to working towards being just able to do like the basic things that we take for granted, having a 5-minute conversation without interference of these voices, or delusions, that they are suffering with. So that's the population I work with. I work amongst a team, I said this before, of psychiatrists, medical specialists, nurses, there's a dietitian. I always say that I have to throw the dietitian in. I guess you can look at the dynamic of the team as supposed to be like holistic health, right? It's not just mental, psychiatric, or medical, but it focuses on what a person is eating. There's a spiritual aspect too, because we actually have a shaman, I think there. We have people who practice Islam. Of course, there are people who believe, in Jesus and Christianity, practice Christianity, but we have a good number of guys who practice Islam. So, I meant to say Iman. There's an Iman there, and that comes on the ward and does religious, spiritual practices with them, or have those kinds of talks with them. So I work with an interesting selection of patients, of individuals, and I still do psychological testing, not necessarily intakes, but it's psychological testing as needed to help determine the course of their treatment going forward. And some very intricate kind of, I want to say complex, but it can be complex. And when you think about it, I think sometimes we minimize like the intricacy or the complexity of just being a human being. But being a human, is pretty complex. You think about it. We're not just simple cut and dry people. Just take the average person. So yeah, we're very multi-layered and very dynamic, and a lot of the cases that are part of my caseload on my ward, they're pretty complex. It's not just as simple as recommending psychotherapy, talk therapy for 50 minutes a week and just talking about your thoughts and your feelings and you're going to be better. It's not that cut and dry. So I think I pretty much covered it in a nutshell, a big nutshell in terms of the differences in my role as a clinical psychologist and working at a psychiatric hospital versus working in a prison setting. Which do I prefer? I definitely have to admit that working at a psych hospital is more exciting and more unpredictable. Yeah, definitely more unpredictable. It may seem though that there comes a regular routine or a monotonous type of work that happens, once you're working there, for a period of time, but nah, no 2 days are the same, I would have to say. And because there's so many different factors that play into the variety of what my work looks like on a day-to-day basis. We're talking about individuals who have mood lability. Their mood changes at the drop of a dime, right? Now, there's patterns in their behavior. So even though there are difference in their mood, right, and changes in their mood, just sporadic changes, there's a pattern, right? You can see there a wavelength that's constant, over time. So that, and looking at it that way, yeah, their behavior can be predicted, but You just never know. You know, when those changes could happen, right? That's where the unpredictability comes in, right? Just out of nowhere, just like you're walking onto the ward, and just never know. There's so many different examples I can give, where things are happening sporadically, and just like, whoa, I didn't anticipate this today. But yeah, that's what keeps it exciting. It's fun. There are codes that are called where, you know, code can be called for anything from a patient shitting on the floor or smearing feces to a patient having a physical altercation with another patient, a patient banging their head on the wall repeatedly. You see that a lot, I think, with patients obviously who have like poor emotional regulation and poor coping skills, and oftentimes they have lower levels of cognitive functioning, and they oftentimes are on the spectrum too. And so I think that like the intensity of the work kind of gets like undermined. And sometimes people, and I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking this out loud as I'm doing this video, I'm reflecting to see that it's unfortunate sometimes that patients do get overlooked, and patients do get kind of lumped in one box. Oftentimes, you know, leading to a misdiagnosis. And of course, if patients are misdiagnosed, then how are they being treated appropriately and effectively? You know, having worked with such a diverse population of clients, of patients, I have to say that yes, I work with patients who, you know, who committed crimes, right, who are average functioning, but yet still, even at the prison, you know, there's a ward for patients who have psychological disturbances too. Mild though, it's not like extreme or severe like where I work now, but there is a psych ward, so to speak, at the prison where I work for patients who have some suicidality. They're having thoughts of harming themselves. They have attempted to kill themselves, or they're threatening to kill themselves. They are depressed. You know, they suffer from anxiety or OCD and things that, you know, are workable in terms of, you know, treatment, prognosis. But yeah, and also having worked with, you know, individuals, families who have people suffering from autism, right, developmental disabilities. That's what the work I did when I did my pre-doc internship. So anybody know people with autism, you know, the presentation can be very interesting. They are like a rainbow of different types of personalities and presentation and behaviors, and they're very, I would have to say, like I said this before to one of my associates, this guy, and he laughed, but this is just my perspective of how I see people, whether children or adults with autism, that I think it's like an experiment gone wrong. And of course, there are many hypotheses on how autism came about. Like, why are people suffering with autism, right? My theory is that yes, it's like an experiment, a social experiment gone wrong, in a sense that these are very smart people. They have special abilities, not special in a negative way or demeaning way, but special in a sense like they're geniuses. And it's like something went wrong in an experiment, whatever that wrong was, that created these different ability individuals. And I know this because I've done countless number of evaluations. I think actually I did count. So when I got near the end of my pre-doc internship, I had done 150 evaluations. psychological evaluations total. Because I went through my spreadsheet and I counted. I'm like, yo. But when I did it, I was doing so many back to back. And at first it was overwhelming. But then it's like you get in the groove of things. And it just becomes like second nature. And you almost can, it's like part of like who you are, just being able to do it naturally. And so I've done so many, and from what my experience is and working with children and adults with autism with these evaluations, it's just like they all have some unique special ability. And I swear when I would be interacting with them, it's like they knew, they could anticipate and they knew what I was going to say before I said it. Like how? They like knew what I was going to do before I did it. Like way before. It's just like, yo, you're a genius. Like how like the things that they would do would throw me off, because average people of average intelligence, right, or average ability they don't have those kind of interactions with me, right? But then just the way that they would interact with me, it's just like, damn, they freak. Like when I would be doing the testing, and I know that they can't see the answer, right? Or they can't see the prompt, but they're able to already anticipate it. It's just like, how do you know? It's just like, it's a weird phenomenon. And it's just a thing that is hard to describe. It's just this feeling that I got. It's just like, these are magical creatures. That's just how I felt in working with them. So with that, you know, yes, they're on the spectrum, and you see certain problematic behaviors. There's definitely a deficit cognitively, but it coincides or is parallel to a defect, biologically speaking, within their DNA, clearly. And so, you know, a lot of them, they only had a taste for certain foods, right? You know, they would have difficulty with receptive communication. They would have difficulty with sound, you know, very sensitive to certain sounds, right? So that's how you know what's something that was happening on a physiological and biological level. They will be sensitive to touch, right, or certain textures, things like that. Issues with vision. So it's just very interesting population. And I had like when I was working with them, I had like this soft space in my heart, and I felt like that special space, it grew and it grew and it grew. And when I finished my internship there, I felt like I didn't want to leave. And I felt like, okay, even though I was terminating and that was the end, I felt like I want to come back to that. I kind of just like, I felt like, dang, this is something I can see myself doing going forward. But interesting, I kind of switched gears. So, you know, now I work with the state, you know, definitely with people who have psychiatric illnesses. And that was more working with children and adults with developmental disabilities. So different population, but similar. And I think there can be a lot of overlap too. And some of the behaviors can appear one way when it's really something else. So that's where like differential diagnosis comes in, where it can appear like it's a psychiatric illness or a behavioral problem when essentially, you know, it's something that is developmental. Something that they were born with, right? Or something that they actually suffered environmentally that affected their developmental process. So yeah, putting all this together, looking back and just reminiscing and comparing like all my different experiences that I mentioned here in this video, it's just like, yeah, it's really interesting work, to say the least. I can say a common theme that is never going away in my work is that I actually love what I do, and I like people. And it shows. And when I work with my patients, wherever I am, whatever setting I am, like I really connect with them. That's the most important thing to me. I build a relationship with them from day one. And yeah, it's something I don't forget my patients. They don't forget me too, though. That's another thing. It's like they remember me because I connect with them. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to end this video. I was just on another ward today, the ward that I'm actually covering on, and I was using one of their office spaces to participate in a very important meeting. And I heard a knock, and it was a group of the patients that I see, I'm covering for on the ward. And I looked up, and I'm like, and they were like waving, and I was like, oh, just little things. They were waving at me, but the fact that the way that they knocked and they waved just shows like, oh, like it's a connection. Like, oh, that's the person I know, right? Because they could have just kept going, but the fact that they stopped and waved at me, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm different. I'm special myself, but yeah, it's just like the fact that they waved at me and acknowledged that I was there, even though they wouldn't normally see me there necessarily in that particular space, in that room, but I was sitting there in the meeting. Yeah, interesting. And I've had many encounters like that, where even like after I terminated with patients, and they've seen me like out in public. Of course, with confidentiality, I can't initiate interaction with them, but they have initiated interaction with me. And just like, hi, Dr. So-and-so. Hi, Miss So-and-so. And I'm like, hi. They remember, right? So it just goes to show, like, when you do good work with people, like, they will remember you, and they appreciate and they value you, and definitely that feeling is reciprocated. So that's why, like, I'm drawn to this work, and that's why I'm still here. It is difficult work. It's not easy necessarily. It does require a lot of courage, a lot of strength, a lot of resiliency. It's like just as much as a resilience that these individuals have to hold within themselves. It's just as much as resilience that the people working with them, these helping professionals such as myself, we have to hold within us. So I've said this to a colleague because it's interesting, like, when people find out certain pieces of information about a clinician, right, or a helping professional, such as a psychologist or a therapist, and they're like wowed by it, like, oh my God, like, can you believe? I just think, I don't know, I'm from a different era from me. Like, I don't judge people, and I think people are so caught up in their own ego and blinded by their own ego that they don't recognize that there is no difference between themselves and the people that they're judging. So I'm going to say this, and I have to end this video. I should think that, I have a freaking training, a workshop for EPPP, my EPPP exam. Oh, in 18 minutes. Perfect timing. So I was in conversation with a colleague that made a joke about how there was a psychologist that they knew at the facility where I work, and I think they mentioned psychologist, and that this person was wearing, and it's funny how they describe it, oh, they were wearing a dog chain. I'm like, with spikes. I'm like, that's not a dog chain, number one, right? Or a dog collar, but that's how they described it, which kind of speaks to that person's ignorance. And when they said that, I knew exactly the culture which they were speaking towards. Clearly, it's alternative culture, which I'm a part of, the BDSM community. But they described this person as wearing like a dog collar with spikes and the leather and liking heavy metal and all of this, right? And I'm just like, but they were speaking in a way that it was like casting judgment. And for me, when a person starts to speak like that, it shows their level of maturity. Not just personal maturity, but professional maturity, right? Which I'm very thankful that I came from a different school of thought. I'm just a different person because I've also encountered other people. This isn't the first. I mean, I had my own personal experience in my program where even during my freshman year, people were obviously curious about me and other people. But yeah, I tend to stand out. And they Googled me and found my website, which is no secret. I'm not out here broadcasting my website, but I don't fucking keep shit secret. I feel like my life shouldn't have to be secret. I don't have to hide shit. I'm a grown-ass fucking woman. Can I say this? I'm a grown-ass woman. I don't have to hide anything. So, of course, my website is not private. It's public. My social media isn't private. It's public. And it remains public. But, and I've told this story before, how my colleagues came across my website and they were like, ooh, she has a blog. And ooh, she has these things on her website. And I'm just like, so fucking what? I mean, this is my way. This is my platform, number one. This is my way of expressing myself. It's not going to change, right? So people who aren't comfortable in who they are have the tendency to want to cast judgment on someone else. Like, this is America. You know, stay in your lane. You be you and let another person be them. But they had like these they were so curious. Like, you're curious, number one, so that speaks that, okay, it's speaking to something in you. The fact that your ass curious enough to want to sneak your ass on my website. And then not only that, but you're snooping around. So to get to the point, the page on my website, which they reference, to even get to that point, you had to have something in you. Some kind of curiosity. Because if you didn't, then why are you still going? Turn around. I'm not going to spend 2 seconds on something that disgusts me, right? That I don't like, right? It has to be something in you that is still drawing you further and deeper into the abyss of my mind, which I expressed on my website, right? In the form of a story. I'm an author. And that annoyed me, right? So having this interaction, this conversation with this person, as they were talking about another psychologist and their presentation and them just expressing who they are. That's an expression. If a person is wearing a collar with spikes, they call it a dog collar. It's not a dog collar. It's just collar. If a human being is wearing a collar around their neck, it's not a dog collar. It's a collar. But yeah, it just irks me how people want to cast judgment. Granted, their opinion isn't not worth the fucking paper they wipe their ass with, but it's annoying. It's just annoying because it's just like, who asks you for a person to offer their opinion as if they are above someone else? That's what irks me, right? Like, people position themselves as if they are above you because they live a different lifestyle than you, right? And they want to put labels on your behavior and judge you based on what you're doing with yourself, which is simply being yourself and expressing yourself, right? I just never understood that. And especially even more so working in the field that we work, like, yo, this is psychology, right? This is the field of mental health, right? As a psychologist, first and foremost, one should operate from a place of understanding, right, as opposed to judging a person. But anyway, I digress. So I say that to say, I know that this video will perhaps be seen by my colleagues now. And I don't give two shits. Clearly, if I gave two shits, I wouldn't make the video. I don't care. I don't, like I said, I don't go out like broadcasting. Oh, Kendra G is going live right now. I don't go out like broadcasting that, oh, I have a YouTube channel like in my professional work. I like to keep my personal life separate from my professional life, but sometimes they bleed into each other, and it's just like, oh well, like if you find my channel, you find my channel. I'm not going out handing out my fucking business card to my colleagues, but they are curious. And one of my colleagues was like, oh, I thought that maybe you would vlog. And I said, oh, I am a vlogger. And it's like, oh, you are? You write or you make videos? I make videos. And they're like, oh, what do you make videos about? And I said, what I talk about, a number of things, right? It's not just one specific thing. I talk about whatever I want to talk about. I don't understand how people don't get that. It's like, whatever. I can talk literally about whatever, right? Whatever comes to my mind. But then I share that lately it's been, you know, cuckolding, which that's what you guys like for me to talk about. And I'm okay because I like alternative sexual lifestyles. So I talk about cuckolding because part of me is interested in that. Though I have not participated in that arena necessarily, but I've expressed some fantasy I had relating to cuckolding. So I said that to this person. And you're like, what's that? Just like, touch your nose. I'm going to be all up in here. So, yeah. I'm not surprised, you know, if people that I work with currently now stumble across my channel, my YouTube, my Facebook, or whatever, these videos. Like, I'm going to still be me. That doesn't change. I've already faced ridicule my very first year as a PhD student. I'm a pro at this shit. I've been called to meetings, right, where my behavior or my content has been held in question and said to be in conflict with my role as a developing psychologist. Bullshit. I don't care. Like, why are you here? Why are you here on my page, right? If you don't like what you see, go on. That's why I like that this is America and you get to be who the fuck you want to be, right? And I get to express myself in any way I shall please. However, if you are entertained by my content, feel free to watch. Just know, yes, my channel is monetized. So as you're watching, I am making money. Guarantee you that. Either way though, I make money regardless if you watch my videos. And like I said, I'm not here for the views, for people who think it's about views. And I have people, like I said in the previous videos, that try to say, oh, well, I can show you how to get more views. Listen, I'm not here for the views. I'm an entrepreneur. So, money comes to me. But on that note, I'm going to end here. Feel free to share your comments below. I like that I am, and I've always been, just content with myself and being who I am. And just being in alignment with the universe and knowing that I get to just be me and be successful at just being me. That the universe is always operating in my favor, whether people like it or not. I laugh because there have been people who have tried to destroy me, who have just tried to destroy the path that I'm on, right? To no avail. I laugh. And they despise that shit. It's like, damn, this bitch. Listen, go find something else to do, right? But my life is already preordained, and my path going forward is already written in stone. It's nothing you can do to try to alter that. And it's bigger than you. It's bigger than me. Right? It's bigger than my role as a psychologist where I work. So, understand that. Yeah. And you can sit back and enjoy the show. I'm trying to say I have one more thing to say before I end this video. It's always one more thing. But, yeah, what is the weather doing here in New York? what is the weather doing? I love my neighborhood where I live. It's just so me. How I just stumbled in this neighborhood, just landed here. Just like I landed in Hollywood when I first moved to LA. I just somehow landed in Burbank, California. Just landed like, But yeah, I love myself. I love my life, and I love you guys. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. I like being like inconspicuous, right? I like that. Though I have a role as a clinical psychologist, a lot of people don't know that I'm a vlogger. They don't know my life after work. But I find it interesting that this person mentioned that person that she said was wearing a dog collar and leather and all of this. Like, they were so fascinated by this person's life after work. Like, oh, what the fuck is y'all motherfucking ass doing after work? Like, yo, don't get me on here. Do not get me on here going, yo. Because I will fucking go. Like, do not get me on here. But I got to end this video because y'all know I can go on and on. I'm just going to end it right here. I'm about to get ready for this free 90-minute workshop to prepare for this EPPP. And I like how when I was in this meeting today, they spoke into existence. They said, when you pass this exam in November, may the universe be with me. No. I'm speaking things into existence as they were speaking things into existence in terms of my upcoming steps, in terms of what I'm going to be doing. And I had to let a superior know that you think I'm going to be here too much longer? Nah, like, I might not even be there that much longer, you know? So appreciate me for what y'all have right here and there. Because who knows how much longer I'm going to be there. And I feel really good. Like, yo, I feel really good where I'm in my life right now. So I just have to say that. And some things may not make sense. Because you guys who are stumbling across me in this moment don't know me. And you don't know my past and the things I've been through. That's the reason why, yeah, I felt like I had to share my story. American Dreamer is yet to be released. But it's an autobiography that I wrote that reveals parts of who I am and some things I went through. And then it begins to come, like, together and begin to make sense. Like, oh, she is untouchable. Oh, she is a star seed. Oh, okay. Okay, she's protected. Oh, we get it. All right, on that note, catch you guys later. I laugh. I laugh because